I'm Daniel James, and you're listening to 7am. Donald Trump has found a new way to make money. Trump Media and Technology Group is monetising the president's social media posts, selling Wall Street firms early access to them for as much as $100,000 a month. And in the world of traders, a few milliseconds can mean millions of dollars. Now, Trump is being sued over the arrangement, and he claims it gives paying customers preferential access to official presidential communications. At the same time, Trump Media is also moving into prediction markets, a fast-growing corner of finance that can turn political events into betting opportunities. Today, journalist for Reuters, Anirban Sen, on the extraordinary collision of presidential power, private profit, and a booming industry where almost anything can become a wager. It's Monday, August 24. Anirban, Trump Media, which is a company Trump owns, is now charging trading firms up to $100,000 a month for fast access to posts from Trump and other senior officials. What exactly is being bought and sold here?
So basically, Truth Social is planning to sell investors and traders who deal with stocks, bonds, currencies, derivatives, and other types of assets super fast access to posts from Trump himself, as well as other high-profile accounts on the platform. So basically, if you're like a high-frequency trading firm or a hedge fund who wants to pay for these types of posts, you will basically get faster access to these posts. And from Trump himself and from other high-profile accounts on the platform, like other government officials and lawmakers. As you know, there are some of the most followed accounts on Truth Social belong to Trump himself and others around in his orbit, including his sons, Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, as well as some of his other prominent supporters like Dan Bongino and Sean Hannity.
Why can getting a presidential announcement even milliseconds earlier be worth so much money?
Yes. So this is the sort of access that is immensely valuable to like large Wall Street trading firms and hedge funds who typically generate profits that can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more, like sometimes millions on any given trade, because faster access to this kind of market-moving information provides like a huge speed advantage to trading firms that use sophisticated algorithms and automated systems to place or cancel trades. You're often looking to profit from fleeting differences in the prices of assets. You know, that's the arbitrage that you're looking to profit from, which means that how fast you respond. We're talking about milliseconds and nanoseconds over here, you know, and that can mean the difference between, let's say, $1 million loss or $1 million of profit. So that's the kind of difference, you know, a millisecond can make in this world of high frequency trading.
So the sky's the limit in terms of how much money could potentially be made here. US news outlets, The Intercept and the Freedom of the Press Foundation are suing Trump over this scheme. Can you tell me about the case?
Yes. So what happened was like The Intercept and the Freedom of the Press Foundation, they basically made the argument that this service violates the United States Constitution, the First Amendment rights. What the First Amendment dictates is that everyone gets equal access to information that is out there in the markets. Like, you know, whether you're like a big Wall Street trading firm or if you're like a mom and pop retail investor, you deserve equal access to information. So the argument that The Intercept and the Freedom of the Press Foundation is making is that there's no legitimate government interest in selling Trump's posts to private subscribers and letting him profit.
Trump Media's defense is essentially that these posts are public information anyway. So how has that defense been received by its critics?
So it depends on which side of the political aisle you are, Daniel. Like you've had Senator Mark Warner of Virginia and a couple of other senators like Elizabeth Warren and a few others who've said that this new service is sort of amounts to a self-dealing by the president, and it creates like a two-tiered system for access to government information.
Raise your hand if you believe that President Trump selling information about our economy and foreign policy to Wall Street before everyone else gets access to that information is good for the integrity of our capital markets. Well, There we go. I see no hands. So maybe if the Republicans on this committee want to strengthen the capital markets, we can start by outlawing what President Trump is doing.
And it sort of threatens the credibility of U.S. capital markets. I mean, that's the argument that some of his critics have sort of made about this service. And some legal experts have also argued that this is kind of like a form of insider trading where like a handful of companies pay for access, to privileged material, non-public information and reap massive profits, at the expense of everyday like retail investors. So all these critics and some of these legal experts, they've raised the questions around whether this is just another way for Trump and his family to sort of boost their fortunes by profiting off policies announced by his administration.
Perish the thought. And on top of this, Anirban, Trump Media is also developing something called Truth Predict, which would move the company into prediction markets. So what is the idea behind Truth Predict and how would it work?
I think that service, if I'm not mistaken, it's been scaled back. So it would have been pretty similar to the way like some of these leading prediction markets platforms like, Polymarket and Kalshi, these new age sort of exchanges where people can bet on real world events, which could be like either a sporting event or a political event or the weather. So you can create like a yes or no contract based on what event you're betting on. And they've really come up over the past couple of years, especially dating back to the 2024 presidential election, which truly was like a turning point for the industry.
So if you can bet on anything, including the weather, you can obviously also bet on government actions as well.
Yes, you have seen a number of examples of a series of well-timed bets ahead of important policy announcements, especially over the past 12 months.
Coming up, the suspiciously well-timed bets on what the president will do next. Anirban, tell me more about these markets where you can bet on wars, political decisions, and what the president is going to do next, which would have been unthinkable a couple of years ago. Tell me more about how we've arrived at this situation.
Yeah, so you need to, Daniel, wind the clocks back a little bit and go back to 2024, especially during the presidential election. It sort of turned the whole industry into like a mainstream phenomenon. Like previously, this industry was at the fringes pretty much. Like it was never anywhere close to the mainstream, and there weren't like regulations that had been sort of developed to sort of govern prediction markets. But the presidential election really sort of changed that, because back then, a lot of the traditional sort of polling companies, they sort of got a lot of outcomes wrong. Whereas if you were a user on Kalshi or Polymarket, like the majority of the polls actually managed to get it right. Like they all along predicted that Donald Trump would win by a landslide. And that's pretty much what happens. And then, once the Trump administration came into power, the industry also benefited from easier regulations, like a lighter touch regulatory environment, which allowed these platforms to grow even further. Just to give you an idea, like Polymarket and Kalshi, I think they were both valued at, I think, somewhere less than $2 billion before 2025. And now Kalshi is in talks to raise like a fresh round of funding at $40 billion. So wrap your head around that, like from $2 billion to $40 billion in like 18 months. And Polymarket similarly, there, I think it talks to raise like fresh capital at around $20 billion. So this industry has just benefited like immensely from that breakout moment in 2024, and also like an easier regulatory environment, which has been a big tailwind.
I mean, there's been a lot of reporting around suspiciously well-timed bets on US government actions in particular. What have you noticed about the timing of some of these bets and some of these decisions?
Yeah, good question. More than 150 wallets on Polymarket may have traded on inside US military information. And it further sort of raises questions and concerns that the market could basically broadcast signals which can be exploited by foreign adversaries. So that soldier who was charged back in April for using classified information to bet on the removal of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro.
That a special forces soldier has been charged for making more than $400,000 by betting on whether or not Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro would be removed from office. And here's the thing. According to the indictment, the officer participated in the planning and execution of the operation.
And back in March, just before Trump announced the strikes on Iran, like there were a series of well-timed bets that were placed on some of these big exchanges.
A number of punters have reportedly made about $1 million by correctly predicting when the United States would strike Iran at the weekend.
They were placed precisely a few minutes before the policy announcement from Trump, which means that obviously some insiders profited from early access to information from Trump's inner circle.
6 accounts in particular correctly predicted the timing of the strikes and made about $1 million from those bets. Now, these were all accounts which were funded, generally speaking, in the 24 hours leading up to the strikes.
And there's this former congressman called George Santos, like he had publicly posted about attending the State of the Union address.
I'm going to be there for the State of the Union in the gallery, guys. Just chill.
Around the same time, Santos placed bets against his own appearance on Kalshi. And then Kalshi eventually detected those trades and flagged them as potentially suspicious and froze his account and alerted the CFTC and the DOJ.
Justice Department is reportedly investigating George Santos, the former congressman, for insider trading.
Sources say the former Republican congressman placed bets on Kalshi over whether he himself would be attending this year's State of the Union.
So yes, Santos did bet on his own appearance at the State of the Union address.
When it comes to insider trading, even Donald Trump's own teleprompt operator has been under investigation over bets on what Trump would say.
A White House teleprompter operator allegedly used inside information to make more than $100,000 betting on the president's speeches. The White House saying he's now on administrative leave.
I mean, isn't that an indication of how easily these markets can be exploited?
Yeah, it goes to the point that we were just discussing, Daniel, like the guardrails that they put up, like Kalshi, Polymarket, and others have put up. It's just not enough. It's like things are still falling through the cracks, you know? If you're a lawmaker or if you're in any way affiliated to any sort of agency in DC, or you're connected to political circles in any way, or if you're like an executive at a high-ranking company, like basically anyone who's in a position to gain access to privileged information which is not yet public should be banned from creating accounts on these platforms. I mean, that's what a lot of critics have argued. But so far, people are still getting around the system.
So, Anirban, when you can literally bet on anything, where does this end? Because it's already pretty dystopian. Some of the stuff you can bet on now is kind of like beyond what we would have thought of, you know, even sort of months ago. How much worse can it get?
Yeah, I think only time will tell, Daniel. Kalshi and Polymarket recently updated their rules to prevent users from creating certain types of contracts. Like, for example, both platforms, I think they banned specific categories of bets which were sort of regarded as too violent or harmful, or which could potentially involve insider manipulation, including like contracts on wars, death, things like political assassinations, nuclear conflicts, kidnapping, and missile strikes. So both platforms, I think currently they prohibit individuals from betting on events that they can also directly influence. But there is this fight that is already brewing between like these new prediction markets platforms and traditional derivatives exchanges like, the CME and others. So like I suspect that at some point, the outcome of this debate will be sort of decided by the higher courts, like by the Supreme Court potentially, and then you're probably going to see more concrete rules around the industry. And regulators are also trying to sort of understand like how you can classify like a typical events contract, whether that constitutes gambling and whether that needs to be regulated by state gambling regulators instead of the CFTC over here, which currently regulates platforms like Kalshi and Polymarket. But as of now, it's still evolving. Let's see where things shake out in a couple of years.
And in the meantime, people could be betting on this podcast right now, couldn't they, Anirban?
Pretty much.
Anirban, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me, Daniel. Pleasure talking to you.
Also in the news, a long-nosed fur seal has become the first mammal to die of H5 bird flu on the Australian mainland. The seal was found at Beachport in South Australia. It comes amid an escalation in the outbreak, which has seen 3 mass mortality events involving more than 1,000 greater crested terns. And it's believed an 18-year-old solo hiker found dead last week at Natai National Park in New South Wales may have fallen after detouring off the main track. The family of Lily Hooper have paid tribute to the teenager as an inspiration, saying they hope people will be more cautious hiking after her death. Police last week were forced to apologise after mistakenly telling the family she'd been found alive. I'm Daniel James. Thanks again for listening to 7am. We'll be back tomorrow.